Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Gigi Kopelak. The first time I saw Patricia Frank's work, I thought they were paintings, but it turns out she's a fine artist, photographer. So I'm very happy to have her here today. Welcome, Patricia.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
I'm glad you're here. And so when I'm talking about the first time I saw your work, it was at the gallery at the Rockefeller State Park Preserve. And it was a peony show. It was a gala that was going on.
Yes.
And there were paintings or photographs of peonies, and you was part of the show.
Right.
Yeah.
The show was actually called Blooms, and it was curated by Audrey Leeds, who's been a wonderful mentor to me. And it's a beautiful, beautiful gallery. And even if the people weren't coming for the gala or for the peonies, the whole preserve for somebody who really loves flowers and plants is a wonderful place. But they do have extraordinary tree peonies. The flowers in the show were more varied than just peonies, and very varied in techniques also.
Yeah, yeah. The gallery is wonderful. It's a round gallery, and the peonies were in bloom at the time.
Yeah.
Now, were your photographs of those peonies?
It seems that all the peonies in New York, both the ones at the New York Botanic Garden in the Brooklyn and at the Rockefeller Preserve, comes from one area in Japan that has nothing going for it but tree peonies. So they're all very similar.
Okay. So these are tree peonies, these pictures?
These are all tree peonies, yeah. They're usually the flowers are this big.
I know.
The branches are woodier than normal peonies, and
yeah, they're almost like a little miniature tree.
Exactly.
So something like that. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. I want to be looking at some of these as we're talking about them. For instance, this first one, this pink one. Yeah.
No, that was actually purchased at the show, but one of the things about my technique, which is a synthesis of photography and the computer and digital technology, is that I can do what's called limited editions. So that you do a very limited number of editions, and when that edition, just like lithographs or woodcuts, when those are sold out, so that hopefully more than one person can enjoy each picture.
And so what do you usually make for an edition?
One of 50 usually.
50?
And they're quite large.
And would you say they were all the same size when you do it that way, or can you vary the size in that edition?
The edition needs to be the same size,
okay.
But you could make editions of more than one size.
Okay.
So you could have an edition of edition A and edition B, and
right.
There's all kinds of things now, because it used to be that like your art, or you painted a painting and that was it. That's what you had. And now you have the possibilities. One of the other things I'm doing is trying to produce some cards, because when I didn't have very much money and I went and saw something wonderful, I always wanted to have something of it. And this way, you know, the card has the same beauty, and
that's true.
And
yeah.
So everybody could have a little piece.
Yeah, yeah. So let's look at the other four. One of them was in a magazine.
There's a magazine in Westchester called Hook Magazine, which focuses on the art, food, and the arts, and it's all about what's going on in this area, and it always features an artist. And that was actually an ad there, but I think that we're going to, in the future, do some more work with Hook.
Oh, okay, great. And then the show. Then you had one that you made a card.
Right.
The third one.
The third one is the card that they sent out to announce the benefit in the show, because they need help in getting more money, more financing, especially now.
Especially now.
And you know, when you come and you see, when you go into the preserve, you have horse carts lined up. It's a place where people can take their horses and ride with their children, and
it's wonderful. I know we had Alex here talking about the peony show.
Yeah.
And,
so it's a wonderful thing, and it showed my work really in a way that it's probably never been showed before. And well, I felt wonderful about it.
We stood outside. I was with a friend, and we looked in, and we said, "Oh, look at those paintings in there." So when we got inside, we just couldn't believe it. That your technique, the way you do it, and the close-ups that you get with, like, for instance, this fourth one with this peony, the way you lay out your, I want to say canvas, but you don't work on canvas, do you?
No.
You don't print on canvas. You print on cotton.
And the way I take photographs is is really motivated by the fact that this is digital. I mean, I remember years ago, I went for a job and I shot in India, and we took 500 rolls of film to shoot for a month. Now you have all these tiny little cards. It costs you nothing. So I can use the pictures I take as paint almost. So it doesn't, even if it's a fabulous picture and there's a stick coming up through the middle, or because I photograph the flowers as they're growing, it doesn't matter because the computer lets me turn it back into a painting.
Mm-hmm.
You only see what I want you to see. You don't see what the camera wants you to see.
Right, right. And then this last one is very almost abstract, the way this flower twists and turns. It's beautiful.
And they are there. And if there's a little bit of wind, they flutter in the wind, and they're just such amazing. I love regular peonies, and they're beautiful collections at the Botanic Gardens. But there's something romantic about the tree. They're just too much. They're way over the top.
That's true. That's true.
You know, in a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful way.
Yeah, but I love that you put this black background behind it. It makes it very painterly.
Well, it isn't even actually a black background, because all of these are sitting in a bush and in the sun. But one of the things you can do in the computer is what painters do normally. I want you to look at certain parts of this flower, and I certainly don't want you to look at the leaves. I want you to look at the little yellow things that are inside. What would a bee see? Mm-hmm. And if I let you see everything with the same intensity, your eye wouldn't know where to go. Mm-hmm. So I try to use the same techniques that a painter uses in guiding your eye to where I want you to go and what's important.
Well, it's certainly true of the next one, the anemone. Yeah, that's you've created that tilt the way that, I'm sure you have a choice. You could make it go straight. You could take it from the top. And so you have created a beautiful composition.
And that is one of the few that we brought today, where I was able to put a white card, which is what created that gray background. And there's another one that we'll look at. So sometimes, especially in my own garden, I more and more am growing a garden to photograph. So in my own garden, I can, so you don't always have everything that's dark. I can put a white card, a color card. But most of the times when I shoot in Botanic Gardens, you're kind of like that. Right. And that also is why I use the camera I use, because...
And what are you using?
I'm using an 880 Canon, very small point-and-shoot camera. It's 10 megapixels. It's very good. This particular camera is very good on close-ups. Okay. But it's very, very light, so that I can reach and lean and try to get in as close as possible.
I remember you told me the story. You went to buy an $8,000 camera or something like that, and you ended up with...
I went to buy a whole regular Canon, the big expensive Canon, and I realized that I wouldn't be able to hold it. Those cameras are really meant to be used on tripods, especially the specialty lenses. And because I had everything to look at, the Canon guy said, well, why don't you give this a try? And I love it now. I can have 2 of them or 3 of them. They all take the same cards. They cost about less than $300.
So you do have more than one.
And I have more than one because a few weeks ago at the Botanic Garden, I wasn't paying attention and I dropped it right on the concrete. Oh my! So then I can just take another one out. Or once I left it in a taxi cab.
Oh, okay.
And
it's like my glasses.
This would be such a horrible thing, but I used to shoot with Hasselblads and an enormously heavy Nikon, and in the studio with 4x5 cameras. So to have the freedom of this, it's almost a totally different thing.
Let's talk a little bit, because you're mentioning these big cameras, because you have quite a background in photography. You started out...
I went to art school, and I went to Rochester Institute of Technology, which is a photography school, and studied with some really wonderful people, including Minor White, and at that time the class went out to Yosemite and studied with some the great people out there, and then we did advertising photography.
So when you got married, you and your husband?
Married, my husband and I We did advertising photography, and you use big cameras, and we did all still life. So that was probably the start of my paying attention to something sitting there as opposed to trying to capture. When you do people, you're kind of capturing movement, capturing an instant in time.
But you traveled all over the world, which is so interesting, because and then you came back to almost like your childhood, you said, because you always loved the garden when you were younger.
Yes. Even when my mother and we lived in a garden apartment, and I would make her go out and buy me a little box of marigolds, dig up the dirt underneath our window and plant them. So there was always a fascination with the colors and the shapes and just growing. You know, now in my own garden, I can watch a flower be a bud and open up and until it just, all the petals just fall off and all you have is the little seed things left on. And so it's...
Well, let's look at the next one then, the close-up of the anemone with the red background.
And that's actually, the petals.
That's the petals, right.
And, and this year actually is the very first year I'm growing anemones in my own garden. These are, you can see, if you want to photograph anemones, all you have to do is go in the spring to any garden store, and there are pots and pots and pots of them, and another flower called ranunculus. But there's some things that are just wonderful to grow yourself and watch.
And then the bird of paradise, is that from Hawaii?
That's actually from California, where they're a weed, and they hack them back with machetes because they're so aggressive.
How kidding.
But they're just so exquisite. And
well, I mentioned Hawaii because you lived in Hawaii also, didn't you? From Alaska.
Alaska and Hawaii. My husband and I traveled in an Airstream trailer for a while, and we were agricultural inspectors. And that allowed us to travel all over the lower United States. And then in Alaska, they need an agricultural inspector in the summer because all the Army bases and Air Force bases up near Anchorage buy from the local farmers, but you need to have it all USDA approved. So they need to get somebody up there for the summer. So we were fortunate enough to go up there, and I grew a garden up there, which was amazing. I would go out every day and mark 6 inches off on my broccoli, you know, because it just, every single day, everything would, it's a very short growing season, but when things grow there, they grow fast and big and luscious.
Wow, that's interesting to know, because I wondered about that.
There's tons of flowers, and, you know, they're just, the season is more compacted, and especially in Alaska, the hills get covered with fireweed, which is a shocking pink, fuchsia pink.
Wow.
So it's exquisite. It's really exquisite.
But this is before you're taking these photographs now. But you were always had a camera.
I really always had, since I was, my first husband was interested in it, and he got me interested in it, and so we would, that would be our vacations, or, you know, what we would choose to do for fun.
Oh, okay. So then you end up in Hawaii. And you were there early days of Hawaii.
Right, when there were still very few people there before it was all built up, and I switched over to a second husband. And he was very familiar with people who lived there, the Baldwins, and, you know, people who had been there for generations. So that was very interesting, and I was introduced to some orchid growers, and it just... everywhere, even when you hike in the woods, there's wildflowers everywhere. So as I just got older, I got more fascinated by flowers. And of course, they're not nearly so disappointing as people sometimes. You know what to expect, and they pretty much
stay there. I'm taking your picture right now. Don't you move. All right, let's look at the morning glory. Are you growing those in your garden now, morning glories? Oh, I'm skipping. I'm sorry. Gardenia is next.
The gardenia, yes.
I'm used to reading captions under instead of over.
Now that actually was one I went to a garden store and I bought a gardenia plant for the summer in the garden, and I'd never really seen one that curled down and had green in the back, and now I see that there are really a lot of varieties. That was another one. I didn't put any color into that. That was the back of the flower. So now, as I start to do my garden and as I do my photograph, it means exploring what kind of rhododendrons are there, what kind of gardenias are there, how many different varieties. And the more people get interested in plants, which is the same thing that's happened with food, the more the growers are encouraged to do a lot of breeding. So now you can get echinacea, which used to be pink. You can now get 15 colors, fabulous colors and shapes, and double ones and single ones and curled ones, and it's so exciting.
You'll never run out of subjects to
I hope not.
The next one is amazing because you have natural complementary colors in there, the purple and the yellow, and yet it's just, you really see things in an iris that the rest of us don't.
And irises especially. I mean, if you tried to put those colors together in your house, people would, but in an iris you go, oh, look how beautiful.
So this is a natural color. This is the color.
This is a natural color
of the iris.
And I try not to change the natural color unless there's a reason for it. Either I change the whole shape and feeling of it, but it's one of the things that flowers do fabulously is color. So why would you really want to change it or add it? Sometimes I intensify it just a little bit. And also putting it on black just makes it seem more intense.
Right, but this one is amazing. It's not all, it's just the close-up of the whole iris. And then Lily is another one of the white cards that you put behind it.
I was able to put a white card. And actually, that is actually, I believe, 2 flowers, which is something that you can do now in the computer. And you can take, and also the next one is that you can take 2 photographs and put them together. And in many different programs, there's programs for PCs, there's programs for Mac, there's a wonderful free program called Picasa that anybody who wants to work with photographs can use. And there's a whole community on the internet to help you and to stimulate you to grow in your artisticness. And so it's not so much about what you do individually in the programs, but the effect you're trying to get. I'm trying to take it away from the photography and make it more painterly because people are used to seeing photographs more as a record of things or as a social comment, and a painting can just be beautiful. A painting can feed your soul with its beauty and enlighten your spirit. And photography has a history of enlightening you, of showing you things that maybe are disturbing, so that as I move more away from the photograph and more into the painting, I think people are more comfortable with just beauty.
I wonder what you're saying, though. You're calling it a painting, but I think what you're saying is that you're putting more of yourself. Am I right? In other words, instead of just saying you're going to report on a flower, you're saying that I'm going to manipulate this, I'm going to change it. I mean, because really in the end it's not a painting, but when you think of a painting, you think of it's an artist's interpretation of something, and that's what this really is. It's your interpretation of what you're seeing.
And not only just my interpretation of what I'm seeing, but also kind of the interpretation of how it's making me feel. And one of the people that really helped me with that was David Hockney. I went and I looked at his work and I didn't get it. What is this crazy chair with all this? And then they had a wonderful exhibit at the Metropolitan Museum, and they explained that he was trying to show you what the chair felt like, not what the chair was from just, I see your face. But if he was photographing you, he would photograph you from the side, because to know you, I can't just know your nose like this, I have to know your nose from the side. So he was trying to show you more than a traditional painting shows you, and it gave me the idea that you can put your own feelings into it and incorporate your own feelings into it like a painter does, and try to guide people's eye to a certain place, or have them look at something they might have you might have walked by that morning glory 50 times and never looked at it, but now I'll make you stop and look at it, and maybe the next time you walk by you'll stop.
Well, certainly this morning glory, both of them, first the blue one and then the purple one, are first I have to find a morning glory, but then I'm definitely going to look at it a different way. I mean, you've just made it it's translucent. It's amazing. It's beautiful.
And they're actually, they could be the same morning glory.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have one. The first one is 2 pictures put together to give you that feeling,
Mm-hmm.
but the second one is virtually unaltered.
Mm.
It's just close up, and when they start to fade, the colors start to change and diffuse, and so the one that was blue in the morning is purple in the afternoon. And so there's so much that you can do with even just flowers. You can play around with them. You can show them just how they are.
Like with this next one, the ranunculus.
Ranunculus. Yeah.
That I've never seen a flower like that. Is that the whole flower, or
That's
is that
the whole flower, and actually that again is a composite of 2 flowers, but that's really what they look like.
Okay.
And they're in the garden stores in the spring, and they're in hot pink and
Are they
red
tiny
and
little
yellow.
flowers?
They're about this big.
Okay.
And sometimes they have stripes on them, and they're wonderful. They come in little corms. In California, you can put them in the winter. Here, you have to put them in the spring.
Okay. And this tulip, it's like no other tulip. This must be as the tulip is fading into...
Exactly. And
yeah.
the leaf has just come down.
Mm-hmm.
And this is... I thought I would artist something. The tulip itself is exactly those colors, and there's a few variations that they kind of sell that you'll see in the catalogs. And I buy some of the flowers because I think that they're so interesting. I want to photograph them. And now more and more I'm doing that, where, oh, look, this will make a fabulous picture, so let's do that one. let me put this in the garden somewhere.
Okay. So let's go back to, so now you're in Hawaii, and I think that's where we left off.
Mm-hmm.
And then how do you get back here?
Well, Hawaii got big, and it was no longer the outpost, and I was in my early 40s, and I needed to have retirement, and I didn't have retirement. I had a fabulous life and wonderful memories. So I came back to New York, and I had worked in fine dining as a waitress, because you can go anywhere in the world and get a job immediately once you start doing that. And I came back and I worked for Philip Morris and then American Express in their executive dining rooms. And I got attracted to what was happening with computers, because they came up with speaker support slides, and I wanted to see how they were done. So I traded some of my steak on rosemary toast for a peek at the machines downstairs. And I said, oh, I really want to do this, and they allowed me to come down and start learning what was then a big workstation to make speaker support slides. And right at that time, the Macintosh happened.
Okay.
And it changed everything.
Yeah.
It made typesetters obsolete. It changed everywhere. I was doing packaging for Pfizer, and when I went there, we would send out to some place and get type and paste it down, and at the end, everything was done right on the computer, and you print it out and made the files, and I could take a CD of the files and go to the printer and print 1 million boxes of Viagra. Which I made. I made the box for Viagra. Yes.
I don't know that I've ever seen that, but I'll have to look for that now too. So and so then so now you're hooked.
So now I'm really hooked on computers, and I was able, when I went to Pfizer, I was able to go as a consultant. So I bought my own computer for the very first time, and I mean, that's a lifelong addiction, I guess, like having a boat, or and it just went from there. And because I worked in an office, I was privileged to have my own office, but I didn't have my own window. When I left Pfizer, all I wanted to do was go and be in the garden, be outdoors, grow something, you know, and that's how. Then I started photographing it, and it's just kind of snowballed. It's about 6 years now that I really put the focus on.
Amazing, amazing. I have to say that the next group is some of my favorites, because they're very abstract. And starting with this one, the ornamental okra. Now, is that?
That's actually a flower that's about this big, and just beautifully textured, which you can see in this. Yeah. And again, that was a number of photographs that were put together. And sometimes I just play. The computer becomes a paintbrush, and your photography becomes your paint. and it doesn't really matter what program. Each program brings something else. There's a program called Painter, which allows you to make a canvas background and construct brushes so that when you paint on it with your photograph, it's as if you were painting on canvas. It's just
But you're not
incredible.
using the paint. You're not changing the colors.
No,
No,
I'm not.
no.
But I am digitally lifting the color from the photograph into my, putting it in my, and that's the color I use.
Okay. And so the next one, Calla Lily.
And the Calla Lily, that's more taking a small piece and distorting it. And there
So
are things where you can twirl them around. And so I just wanted you to look at that. Everybody sees the Calla Lily the same way. I wanted.
Now, would you print that very large? It almost reminds me of Georgia O'Keeffe in a way, you know. 'Cause I was just at the Met yesterday and saw her. Yeah.
I mean, that's the wonderful thing about this technique. You control it from the photography through the computer. I have a big printer through the printer, and you can. It's not exactly what you want, so you have total control over the whole thing. Just like you as a painter, you really have total control over your canvas.
No, I think the canvas has control over me. I really do. We'll have to get into that discussion sometime. So let's look at the others because we're really winding down, and I don't want to miss any of them. The next blue Calla Lily.
The blue Calla Lily is really something that's just a distortion and a change in color, and just really seeing what can I make the machine do that's way away from the camera. It's moving more. And the next Calla Lilies also, they were just green, and so while I wouldn't color a flower,
these are leaves, the Calla
the canna leaves. While I wouldn't color flowers, I have no hesitation about
coloring leaves. And the fuchsia?
And the fuchsias also, 2 layers that were put together in Photoshop, and one of the way you can composite them creates this basic effect, but the colors come from the flower. The leaves are colored.
Amazing. Now that is almost an abstract painting. It really is. And then the 2 magnolias
are also 1 or 2 pictures composited together, distorted, just to play around. Because mostly what I do are very realistic things, but every once in a while, because the computer is such a versatile tool.
And because you're such a creative person.
And so it gives me a lot of things to experiment with.
Yeah, I can't imagine what you're going to do in the next 6 years.
Well, I guess maybe I'll learn to play music on it.
Patricia, this has been so enjoyable. Too fast. It always goes too fast.
Thank you so much.
Wow.
It's just, it's wonderful talking to another artist.
Oh, well, thank you. It's wonderful talking to you. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you so much for watching.